flames licked at the night sky, casting an infernal glow on Karen's tear-stained face. The acrid smell of smoke stung her nostrils, but it was nothing compared to the burning rage that consumed her. Her house, her beautiful Victorian with the wraparound porch and the rose garden she'd nurtured for years, was now an inferno. "We told you, you old bat," a voice cackled from the shadows. A hulking figure emerged, his face obscured by the hood of a black sweatshirt. "You should have just paid the damn dues." Karen recognized him. It was Bruno, the son of Mr. Henderson, the HOA president she'd clashed with over their draconian rules. Her voice, usually calm and measured, now shook with fury. "You burned down my home over HOA dues. This is arson. You'll rot in jail." Bruno laughed, a chilling, empty sound. "You think anyone will believe you? You're just a crazy old woman who wouldn't follow the rules." He spat on the ground near her feet, then turned and melted back into the darkness. Despair threatened to engulf Karen. He was right. Who would believe her? The HOA had been harassing her ever since she'd moved in, refusing to join their organization on principle. They'd fined her for the color of her front door, for the height of her hedges, even for the birds nesting in her eaves. She'd fought them every step of the way, becoming their worst nightmare. But this was a new level of insane. They'd crossed the line from petty tyranny to outright criminality. A new wave of anger washed over her, replacing the despair. She wouldn't let them get away with this. She would expose them for the monsters they were. Clutching the only thing she had left, a small fireproof lockbox containing her most important documents, she stumbled towards her car. As she fumbled for her keys, a sudden thought stopped her cold. Her hand trembled as she unlocked the box and pulled out a worn leather wallet. Flipping it open, she stared at the ID card inside. Judge Karen Miller. Retired. Yes, but still a force to be reckoned with. And Bruno had just threatened the wrong judge. A steely glint entered Karen's eyes, erasing any trace of fear. She might have retired from the bench, but the fire that fueled her pursuit of justice still burned bright. Bruno, that arrogant fool, had just handed her all the ammunition she needed. He'd underestimated her, just like everyone else in that power-hungry HOA. She sped away from the inferno, her little car suddenly feeling like a chariot of war. The scent of smoke clung to her clothes, a constant reminder of the injustice she'd suffered. Reaching for her phone, she dialed the first number that came to mind, her former clerk, Michael. "Michael, it's Karen," she said, her voice tight with suppressed rage. "I need a favor. A big one." Michael, blessed his loyal soul, didn't even hesitate. "You got it, Judge. What's up?" "The HOA. They burned down my house." Silence. Then, a sharp intake of breath. "They what? Are you all right? Do they have you?" "I'm fine, physically at least," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "But they're going down, Michael. I need your help to expose them for what they really are." Karen spent the rest of the night at Michael's spare apartment, detailing the years of harassment, the threats, and finally, the arson. With each word, Michael's face grew grimmer. He knew Karen wouldn't make such accusations lightly. He'd seen her bring down powerful men with far less evidence. By dawn, a plan was in motion. Michael, using his network of contacts, began digging into the HOA's finances, looking for irregularities. Karen, meanwhile, decided to pay a visit to someone who might be able to shed light on Bruno's involvement. She knew that Mr. Henderson, as HOA president, was a meticulous record keeper. And she also knew that old habits died hard. Driving towards Mr. Henderson's house, a wave of nausea hit Karen. She hadn't been back to her neighborhood since the fire. As she turned the corner onto her street, her breath caught in her throat. A single fire engine remained, parked across from the smoldering wreckage of her home. But it wasn't the sight of her house that made her heart pound. Parked beside the fire engine was a familiar black sedan. It belonged to the fire inspector. and he was exiting her property, deep in conversation with none other than Bruno. Panic flared in Karen's chest. Seeing the fire inspector so chummy with Bruno, the arsonist who just torched her home, set off every alarm bell in her judgmental mind. This reeked of a cover-up, a conspiracy deeper than she'd imagined. She couldn't confront them directly. Not yet. She needed hard proof, something to solidify her case and expose their collusion. Reversing quickly, Karen parked a safe distance away, her gaze darting between Bruno, the inspector, and her smoldering home. She had to think like a predator, patient and observant, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. Hours crawled by. The sun beat down on Karen's car, turning it into a sauna. She barely noticed, her attention laser-focused on the scene unfolding before her. The inspector, after what seemed like an eternity, finally shook hands with Bruno and drove off. Bruno lingered, a smug smile playing on his lips as he surveyed the damage. This was her chance. Waiting until Bruno disappeared inside his father's house, Karen sprang from her car and marched towards the wreckage. Her heart ached at the sight of her beloved home, reduced to ashes and debris. But grief was a luxury she couldn't afford, not now. Justice for her home, for the years of harassment, fueled her next actions. The fire inspector hadn't erected any barriers, likely assuming the case was closed. Karen, using her cane for support, carefully navigated the debris field. Her eyes, honed by years on the bench, scanned the ground, searching for any shred of evidence they might have missed. It wasn't long before something caught her eye. Half buried in the charred remains of what was once her rose garden, lay a crumpled object. Brushing away the ash, Karen recognized it instantly. A gasoline can, its plastic warped and melted from the intense heat. This wasn't just evidence of arson. It was a blatant confession left out in the open. And on the dented metal, a single fingerprint shimmered in the sunlight. Adrenaline surged through Karen, chasing away the lingering ache in her joints. This wasn't just a lucky break. It was a gift, a smoking gun practically begging to be used. Carefully, she extracted the can from the debris, her heart pounding with a mixture of triumph and trepidation. She knew how flimsy circumstantial evidence could be. She needed to tie this directly to Bruno, make it impossible for him to weasel his way out. Fishing out her phone, Karen dialed Michael, her voice hushed but urgent. "Michael, I found something. Meet me at the old courthouse, and bring your fingerprint kit." An hour later, they were huddled in the dimly lit basement of the courthouse, a familiar haven from Karen's days, presiding over countless cases. The air hung thick with the scent of dust and forgotten justice. Michael, now a private investigator, had embraced his new role with the same quiet competence he'd shown as her clerk. "Gasoline can?" he asked, his eyebrows raised as he examined the evidence. "Found it right in my rose garden," Karen replied, her voice tight with contained fury. "The fire inspector, he's in cahoots with Bruno. They probably thought they could just sweep it all under the rug." Michael whistled, carefully dusting the can for prints. "They messed with the wrong judge, that's for sure. This fingerprint, if it's Bruno's, is gold." The whirring of the fingerprint scanner filled the silence, each second stretching into an eternity. Karen held her breath, her gaze glued to the machine as it analyzed the print, comparing it to the database. Finally, the machine beeped, spitting out a report. Michael snatched it up, his eyes widening as he scanned the results. "Well, he murmured, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Seems like Mr. Bruno Henderson has a rather colorful history with flammable liquids. And guess what? We have a match." Karen allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The pieces were falling into place. But as she looked at the fingerprint report, a chilling thought washed over her. This wasn't Bruno's first offense, and judging by the escalating pattern of destruction, it wouldn't be his last. She had a fire to put out, but it was bigger than just her house now. It was time to expose the truth about Bruno, about the HOA, and about the dark secrets simmering beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect community. The weight of the situation pressed down on Karen. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about protecting others from Bruno's dangerous tendencies. The report in Michael's hand wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a window into a pattern of escalating violence. It chilled her to the bone. "This is bigger than we thought," Karen said, her voice heavy with the realization. "We need to go to the police, Michael. But they won't take us seriously, not with the fire inspector in their pocket." Michael nodded, understanding flickering in his eyes. "You're right. We need more than just the fingerprint. We need something that exposes the whole rotten structure, something that proves the HOA was behind this." Karen paced the room, her mind racing. The HOA's finances. "Michael, you said you were looking into them. Find anything juicy?" Michael grinned, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "Juicy is an understatement, Judge. Seems Mr. Henderson has a taste for the finer things in life. Expensive wines, exotic vacations, all conveniently paid for through miscellaneous HOA expenses. And guess what else? The dates of these lavish purchases. They'd perfectly align with a string of unsolved arson cases in the county, going back years." A cold fury settled in Karen's stomach. It all made sense now. The HOA's iron grip on the community, the fear they instilled in their residents, the suspicious fires that had plagued the area for years. It was a systematic silencing of anyone who dared to question their authority, fueled by greed and enforced by Bruno's twisted idea of order. "They've been getting away with this for too long," she muttered, her voice shaking with anger. "It ends now, Michael. We need to create a firestorm of our own, something big enough to draw attention and bring the whole corrupt system crashing down." Michael leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I believe I know just the thing. Remember that journalist, Sarah Miller, the one you helped put away that corrupt CEO? She's been sniffing around for her next big story. I think she'll find this one particularly incendiary." The newsroom buzzed with a nervous energy as Karen and Michael laid out their case before Sarah Miller. The once empty conference room was now filled with stacks of documents, photographs, and maps that Michael had painstakingly gathered. Sarah, a woman who wore her ambition like a badge of honor, listened intently, her sharp eyes absorbing every detail. Karen, despite her initial hesitation, found herself drawn to Sarah's quiet intensity. This wasn't just a story for Sarah, it was personal. She'd seen firsthand the devastating impact of unchecked power and greed. "Judge Miller," Sarah said, her voice laced with a quiet anger, "this is huge. I've suspected the HOA was dirty for years, but this is next level." "They underestimated her," Michael added, his voice full of pride. "Tried to silence her, just like they've done to others. But they messed with the wrong judge." Sarah tapped a finger on the table, her mind racing. "The fingerprint is damning. The financial records are solid gold, but we need more. Something to connect all the dots, to paint the bigger picture. We need a witness." The room fell silent. Finding someone willing to testify against the HOA, knowing the risks involved, seemed like an impossible task. The community lived in fear of Mr. Henderson and his goons. As if reading her mind, Michael cleared his throat. There might be someone. A former HOA board member, forced out when he started asking too many questions. He was always afraid to talk, but this, he tapped the fingerprint report, this might change things. Karen felt a surge of hope. This man, this witness, could be the key to bringing the whole corrupt system crashing down. But even as she allowed herself to believe, a flicker of doubt remained. Could they convince him to speak out, to risk everything to expose the truth? The fate of the community and her own chance for justice rested on his shoulders. Relevant past chat message. Finding the former board member, a reclusive old widower named Mr. Davis, proved easier than convincing him to talk. He lived in a tiny, cluttered apartment, his face etched with years of worry and regret. When they showed him the evidence, his eyes welled up, his hands trembling as he clutched a faded photograph of a younger, happier version of himself standing beside his wife in front of a beautiful garden. That fire, 5 years ago. It took everything, he croaked, his voice thick with unshed tears. They said it was an accident, faulty wiring, but... He trailed off, his gaze falling on the photograph again. It was Bruno, wasn't it? Karen asked softly, her voice devoid of accusation, only understanding. Mr. Davis nodded, his shoulders slumping under the weight of the truth he'd carried for so long. He wanted my land, for the HOA to expand their clubhouse. I refused, said it was all I had left of Mary. The fire, it started in the garden, just like hers. Karen placed a comforting hand on his arm. Mr. Davis, we believe you. We can expose what they did, but we need your help. He looked up, fear warring with a flicker of defiance in his eyes. It threatened me, said if I ever breathed a word. They could do it again, to anyone. Seeing his terror, Karen knew she couldn't force him. She had to appeal to something deeper, something stronger than fear. She had to remind him of the man in the photograph, the man who loved his wife and his garden enough to stand up to bullies. Mr. Davis, she said, her voice firm yet compassionate, your wife wouldn't want you to live in fear. She would want you to fight for justice for her, for yourself, for all the others who suffered because of them. Don't let them win. Help us honor her memory by exposing the truth. For a long moment, he remained silent, his gaze fixed on the photograph. Then, slowly, he looked up, a newfound determination hardening his features. He nodded, a single tear rolling down his cheek. Tell me what I need to do. As Mr. Davis began to speak, detailing his time on the board, the shady dealings, the threats, and the cover-ups, Karen felt a surge of hope. This was it. This was the break they needed. Sarah, scribbling furiously in her notepad, looked up, her eyes shining with the thrill of the chase. She smelled a Pulitzer, but more importantly, she smelled justice. Just then, Michael's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his face paling. We have a problem, he said, his voice tight with urgency. Bruno and his father, they know we're onto them. They're on the move. A chill snaked down Karen's spine. They had been so close, so focused on building their case, that they had underestimated the ruthlessness of their enemy. Mr. Henderson, a man accustomed to wielding power without consequence, wouldn't hesitate to silence them permanently. They're probably heading for Mr. Davis, Michael said, his voice grim. We need to warn him, get him out of there. But it was already too late. Even as he spoke, the ground shook with the roar of engines. Peering out the window, they saw a convoy of pickup trucks, their beds filled with burly men brandishing HOA logos like war paint, screeching to a halt outside the building. Bruno jumped out of the lead truck, his eyes blazing with fury. Panic surged through the room. Mr. Davis, his frail frame trembling, clutched Karen's arm. They're here. They're going to kill us all. Thinking fast, Karen grabbed Sarah's arm. Get Mr. Davis out of here. Use the back exit. I'll hold them off. Sarah hesitated, her journalistic instincts warring with common sense. But Karen, you can't. Go. Karen barked, her voice cracking with urgency. She may have been retired, but years on the bench had taught her to face down danger head-on. As Sarah and Michael shepherded a terrified Mr. Davis through the back, Karen grabbed the only weapon she could find. A heavy, antique gavel, a memento from her courtroom days. Taking a deep breath, she marched towards the front entrance, a steely glint in her eyes. The door burst open, splintering into pieces as Bruno and his goons stormed in. The air crackled with menace. Well, 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 Bruno snarled, his gaze sweeping across the room until it landed on Karen, her small frame dwarfed by the looming figures behind him. Look what we have here. The judge herself, come to deliver a verdict. He took a step closer, his lips curling into a cruel smile. Too bad for you, Granny. Court's adjourned. Permanently. Karen stood her ground, her grip tightening on the gavel. You're wrong, Bruno, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Court is now in session, and I find you guilty. As Bruno lunged towards her, a blinding light flashed from behind him, followed by the deafening roar of police sirens. Frozen in his tracks, Bruno turned to see a wall of police officers, their guns drawn, swarming the building. Sarah, microphone in hand, stood beside a grim-faced police captain, a triumphant smile playing on her lips. The firestorm had begun.